In 1927, the Great Mississippi Flood cut off clean water for hundreds of thousands of families for weeks. The ones who survived best were not the richest. They were the ones who still kept water the old way. Today, we assume the tap will always run, but number 14 kept farm families alive through droughts that emptied every well in the county. And number 3 uses a metal your grandmother dropped into a crock without knowing why it worked. Science only just caught up. These 25 tricks were common knowledge a lifetime ago. Then we forgot them the moment water became a utility bill. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten water storage tricks. Number 25, fill everything before it hits. The oldest trick in the book was also the first thing a careful woman did when the sky turned wrong or the radio crackled with a warning. She filled everything, not just jugs. The bathtub, scrubbed clean and plugged tight, held 40 or 50 gallons. The kitchen sink, the canning pots, the wash tub, the spare buckets, every empty jar on the shelf. The logic was brutal and simple. The water in your pipes only flows as long as the pressure holds. And pressure is the first thing to go when the power dies or the main breaks. A family that filled up the night before had 100 gallons in the house before the trouble started. A family that waited until the tap sputtered had nothing. Your great-grandmother did this without being told. She had lived through enough dry wells and burst lines to know that the time to gather water is before you need it, never after. Number 24, the cool, dark, off-the-floor shelf, where you put your water mattered as much as how much you had. Water is alive in a sense. Heat speeds up whatever wants to grow in it, and light feeds algae the same way it feeds a garden. So the stored water went into the cellar, the north corner of the springhouse, the dark back of the pantry, anywhere the temperature stayed low and steady, and the sun never reached. And it never sat directly on a concrete floor where chemicals could leach up through a container over the months and where the cold of the slab caused sweating and contamination. A scrap of board or an old wooden pallet kept the jugs an inch off the ground. People think water storage is just about quantity. It is not. A barrel of water kept cool and dark in a cellar will still be sweet a year later. The same barrel in a sunny shed turns green and foul in a single summer. Number 23, canning water in glass jars. Long before anyone sold cases of plastic bottles, farm women preserved water the same way they preserved beans and tomatoes. They filled sterilized mason jars with clean water, left an inch of headspace, sealed them with 2-piece lids, and ran them through a boiling water bath for 10 minutes. The heat drove out the air and sealed the lid down tight. Stored on a cellar shelf, that jar of water would keep for years, sealed against every speck of dust and every wandering microbe. A quart jar was exactly enough for one person for one day of drinking. A woman with 3 dozen sealed jars had a month of survival water sitting quietly in the dark. We laugh at the idea of canning plain water now, but a glass jar does not crack and leak the way an old plastic jug does. It does not flavor the water with the smell of the container, and it lasts a lifetime. Her jars outlived her. Number 22, charcoal in the bottom of the barrel. When water had to be stored a long time, the old hands dropped a fist of hardwood charcoal, the kind cooked down in the fire, into the bottom of the barrel. Not briquettes, real charred wood. Charcoal is riddled with microscopic pores, and those pores trap odors, off flavors, and a surprising amount of the slime and growth that would otherwise foul long-stored water. The barrel water stayed sweeter and cleaner than it had any right to be. This is the exact same principle behind every expensive water filter sold in stores today. The activated carbon the commercials make sound like a modern miracle. It is a campfire trick. Today we pay $40 for a filter cartridge that does the very same job and feel clever about it. The chemistry has not changed in 200 years. Only the price tag has. Number 21, the cloth filter, folded 4 times. Before water could be stored, dirty water had to be cleared, and the humblest tool in the kitchen did the work. A clean cotton flour sack or a square of muslin, folded over on itself 3 or 4 times, was tied across the mouth of a crock. Cloudy creek or rain barrel water was poured slowly through it, and the cloth caught the leaves, the grit, the wriggling things, and a startling amount of what you could not see. In parts of the world where this exact trick was studied, folding old cotton cloth several times and straining water through it cut the cases of cholera nearly in half because the cloth caught the tiny creatures the disease rode on. It did not make water safe to drink on its own, but it made water clear enough to store, clear enough to boil cleanly, clear enough that the charcoal and the settling could finish the job. A grandmother with a flour sack had a water treatment plant. Number 20, rain barrels at the downspout. Every old farmhouse had a barrel sitting fat and patient beneath the corner of the roof where the gutter emptied. A single inch of rain falling on an average roof sheds over 1,000 gallons down the downspouts. That water was free, soft, and falling out of the sky whether you caught it or not. So they caught it. That soft rainwater was prized for washing hair and laundry because it lathered soap like nothing from the hard, mineral-heavy well. And in a long, dry stretch, when the well drew low, the rain barrel was the difference between hauling water for a mile and turning a spigot in your own yard. We tore the rain barrels out when city water came through. We are only now bolting them back on, calling it conservation. Number 19, the rolling boil. When there was any doubt at all, water went over the fire, not a warm pot. A hard, rolling, jumping boil for a full minute, longer up in the mountains where the thin air lets water boil before it gets truly hot. That minute of furious bubbling killed every germ, every parasite, every invisible thing that could put a family flat on its back when there was no doctor coming. Boiling does not remove dirt or chemicals, which is why the cloth and the settling came first, but for the living dangers in water it was, and still is, the surest cure ever found. The boiled water tasted flat, all the air cooked out of it, so they poured it back and forth between 2 pitchers a few times to put the life back in before drinking. A pot, a fire, 60 seconds, no filter cartridge, no chemical, no electricity required. When everything else fails, this never has. First pattern break. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Every single thing on this list so far was once ordinary knowledge, the kind of thing a child absorbed just by living in a house. Then, somewhere in the last 70 years, we made a quiet trade. We handed the entire job of water over to a pipe in the ground and a bill in the mail, and in exchange we agreed to forget how to do any of it ourselves. The trade felt like progress, and it works beautifully right up until the moment it does not, until a hurricane takes the grid down, until a main breaks, until a treatment plant fails, and a whole city is told not to drink from the tap. In that moment, the family that remembered the old ways has a cellar full of sealed jars and a barrel under the gutter. The family that forgot has a list of stores that have already sold out. 30 days is a long time to be the second family. The knowledge did not become useless. We just decided to stop carrying it. Number 18, plain unscented bleach. When boiling was not possible, a few drops of ordinary chlorine bleach made questionable water safe to store. The rule that got passed around was about 8 drops of plain, unscented household bleach per gallon of clear water, then a good stir and a 30-minute wait. Done right, the water carried a faint swimming pool smell, which was the sign it had worked. No smell at all meant you added another small dose and waited again. The chlorine killed off the bacteria and kept new growth from taking hold in long-stored barrels. This is exactly how city water plants make tap water safe, just on a kitchen scale. The one warning the old hands repeated was to use only the plain stuff, never the scented or the splashless kind, which carry additives you do not want in your drinking water. A jug of cheap bleach could treat thousands of gallons. It was the cheapest insurance a family ever bought. Number 17. The spring house. Before the refrigerator hummed in every kitchen, the spring house was the cold heart of the homestead. It was a small stone or timber building set right over a flowing spring so that the cold water ran across the floor in a shallow trough year-round. The constant flow kept the little room near 50 degrees even in August, and the running spring water itself was the cleanest, coldest drinking supply a family could ask for, filtered through a hillside of earth and stone before it ever saw daylight. Crocks of milk and butter sat in the cold trough. Drinking water was dipped straight from the source. A family with a good spring house never worried about the well going dry or the water turning stale, because their water moved and moving water stays fresh. When plumbing arrived, the spring houses fell to ruin, but the ones still standing run just as cold today, asking nothing, costing nothing. Number 16, the slow sand filter. This is the trick that looks like magic and is actually biology. A barrel was packed in layers from the bottom up, with coarse gravel first, then finer gravel, then a deep bed of clean sand. Cloudy water poured in at the top, trickled down through the sand, and came out the bottom spigot clear and clean. What made it work was not just the sand straining out the dirt. Over a week or two, a living layer of harmless microbes grew across the top of the sand, and that thin living skin ate the dangerous germs right out of the water as it passed. Whole towns once got their drinking water this way, and the same barrel sat in countless farmyards. It needed no power, no cartridge, no chemical, just sand, gravity, and time. The version sold today in a fancy housing for a few $100s is the identical idea. Your great-grandfather built his out of a barrel and a creek bank. Number 15, the water heater reserve. Here is a tank of clean drinking water sitting in nearly every American home right now, and most people have no idea it is there. The water heater holds 40, 50, sometimes 80 gallons of perfectly good water at all times. In a long blackout, that tank is an emergency reservoir hiding in the basement. The old plumbers and handy fathers knew to shut off the gas or the circuit breaker first, then close the valve that lets new water in, then open a hot water tap upstairs to break the suction, and finally draw clean water from the drain valve at the bottom of the tank. 50 gallons is enough drinking water for one person for over a month, or a family of 4 for nearly 2 weeks. It was free. It was already paid for, and it sat there full every single day. People who knew this trick walked past a 2-week water supply every time they did the laundry and never gave it a thought. Number 14, the cistern. Here is the one that emptied wells could not beat. A cistern was a great sealed tank, often brick-lined and plastered watertight, built into the ground beside the house or down in the cellar, and every drop of rain that fell on the roof was funneled into it. A good cistern held thousands of gallons. In a wet year, it overflowed, but its real purpose showed itself in the dry years, the droughts that dropped the water table and left every shallow well in the county sucking air. While the neighbors hauled water for miles, the family with a full cistern simply pumped from the cool, dark store they had been filling all winter and spring. Whole regions of the country were settled on cistern water because the groundwater was too deep or too foul to use. They were the original 30-day, 90-day, whole-season water supply, sealed against the sun and the dust, waiting patiently underground. Many old houses still have them, bricked up and forgotten beneath the back porch. Second pattern break. Here is what the bottled water companies would rather you never sit and think about. Everything on this list is essentially free. Rain falls on your roof at no charge. Sand and gravel and charcoal cost almost nothing. A bottle of bleach treats more water than your family will drink in years. There is no profit in teaching people to catch their own rain or filter their own water through a barrel of sand, which is precisely why nobody runs commercials for it. Instead, an entire industry was built on convincing us that safe water comes only in a plastic bottle with a mountain printed on the label, water that often came from a municipal tap to begin with, marked up 1,000 times over. The skills that made families water independent were not lost by accident. They were simply allowed to fade, because a family that can catch and store and clean its own water is a family that does not need to buy any. The most valuable thing on this list is not a barrel or a filter. It is the idea that you can do it yourself. Number 13, the unglazed clay pot. In hot country, families stored their daily drinking water in a wide-bellied pot of porous, unglazed clay, and the pot performed a small miracle. A tiny amount of water seeped out through the clay walls and evaporated in the dry air, and that evaporation pulled heat out of the pot, leaving the water inside cool and refreshing, even when the air outside was blistering. No ice, no electricity, just physics working through baked earth. The clay also breathed, keeping the water from going stale and flat, the way it does sealed in plastic or metal. In the American Southwest and across the South, these pots, the ollas, sat in shaded corners and on porches, sweating gently and keeping the family's water drinkable in heat that would have turned a jug of tap water warm and unpleasant by noon. A blackout in July is a furnace. The clay pot was the forgotten answer to staying cool and hydrated when the refrigerator went dark. Number 12, the copper vessel. Long before anyone understood why, people noticed that water kept in a copper pot or pitcher simply stayed good longer and seemed to keep its drinkers healthier. So copper vessels were prized for water, polished and passed down, and refilled every day. It turns out the old folks were right for reasons they could not have explained. Copper slowly releases a trace of itself into the water, and that trace is poison to the bacteria that spoil water and sicken people and affect scientists now call the oligodynamic action of metals. Water left overnight in a clean copper vessel comes out with far fewer living germs than it went in with. Modern labs have confirmed it again and again. Your ancestors did not have the word for it. They just knew the water from the copper jug never made anybody sick, and that was knowledge enough to keep the jug on the shelf for generations. Number 11, the toilet tank reserve. This one makes people wince, and then it makes them grateful. The tank behind the toilet, not the bowl, the upper tank, holds 2 or 3 gallons of perfectly clean water, the very same water that comes out of your faucet, sitting in reserve in every bathroom in the house. In a true emergency, when the cellar jars were gone and the cistern was dry, that clean tank water was drinkable, especially after a quick boil. The old rule was strict and simple. The tank, yes. The bowl, never. And never if anyone had dropped one of those blue cleaning tablets into the tank because they poisoned the supply. A house with 3 bathrooms held nearly 10 gallons of clean backup water in the tanks alone. Water nobody ever counted and almost nobody remembered. In the lean hours of a long outage, knowing where the hidden water sat in your own walls was the difference between desperation and a calm, full cup. Number 10, sun and a clear bottle. The poorest families on earth discovered the cheapest water treatment ever devised, and it cost nothing but sunlight. Clear water, already strained clean, was poured into a clear glass or clear plastic bottle and laid on its side in full, direct sun for the better part of a day, on a metal roof or a flat stone if you could find one to bounce more heat and light into it. The sun's invisible rays, the same ones that burned skin, tore through the bottle and killed off the living germs in the water hour by hour. 6 hours of strong sun was the rule. 2 days if the sky was cloudy. It cost not a single penny and needed not a single tool a family did not already own. Health organizations around the world now teach this exact method to millions. In a 30-day blackout under a summer sky, a row of bottles glinting on the roof is a water treatment system running on the one thing no power company can shut off. Number 9. The wax-sealed stoneware crock. For the very longest storage, the kind meant to outlast a whole bad season, water and other precious liquids went into heavy stoneware crocks. The lid was sealed down with a ring of melted wax or rendered fat poured around the rim. The wax hardened into an airtight gasket, locking the water away from dust, insects, mice, and the air itself. A crock sealed this way could sit untouched in the back of the cellar for a year or more. When opened, the water inside would be as clean as the day it went in. Stoneware did not crack with cold the way glass could, did not rust like metal, and did not leach flavors like old plastic. It was the deep storage vault of the homestead, the water you did not touch until you truly needed it. The crocks were so durable that the ones our great-grandparents sealed are still sitting whole in farmhouse cellars today, ready to do the same job all over again. Number 8. Rotating the stock. Stored water is not a thing you do once and forget, and the careful families knew it. Every jar, every barrel, every sealed crock got a date scratched or penciled onto it the day it was filled. And on a steady rhythm, the oldest water was used up in the everyday cooking and washing, the container scrubbed out and refilled fresh to go to the back of the line. First in, first out, the same way a good pantry was run. This kept the whole supply young and sweet and ready, so that the day disaster came, there was no cellar full of stale, slimy water that had been sitting forgotten since the year before. It was discipline, plain and unglamorous, and it was the difference between a water store that worked and one that only looked like it did. The trick was never just having water, it was having water that was still good, because a forgotten barrel is not a supply. It is a science experiment. Third pattern break. Here is what nobody wants to say out loud about 30 days. A person can go weeks without food. A person dies in 3 days without water. That is the math that makes this list different from every cozy story about the old days, because water is the one thing where forgetting the knowledge does not mean hardship. It means real danger, fast. And the cruelest part is that a true blackout takes water away in ways most people never picture. The pumps that push city water through the pipes run on electricity. When the grid goes down, so does the pressure, and the tap that worked an hour ago now gives nothing. The well in the yard is no help either, because the pump that lifts that water is electric too. This is why the old hands stored water by the barrel and the cistern instead of trusting the well to always deliver. They had lived through the silence of a dead pump. They knew that the time to think about water is the calm before, never the panic after, because after is already too late. Number 7, melting snow and ice. In the cold country, winter delivered water by the ton, and the families who lived through northern blackouts knew exactly what to do with it. Clean snow and ice, gathered from a spot well away from roads and animals, was melted slowly on the wood stove, or simply set in a pot near the fire. The one hard lesson everyone learned was never to eat the snow straight. Eating snow to quench thirst steals so much heat from the body that it can push a person toward dangerous chilling faster than the thirst itself ever would. So the snow was always melted first, then warmed, then drunk. A wash tub packed with clean snow yielded gallons of water for nothing more than the fire that was already burning to keep the family warm. For half the year, in half the country, the yard was buried in drinking water. The trick was simply remembering that frozen water is still water. Number 6, the hand-dug well and the pitcher pump. Before the electric pump, water came up by the strength of an arm, and that simple fact made the old wells worth more than gold in a blackout. The hand-dug well, lined with stone and topped with an iron pitcher pump, needed not 1 watt of electricity to give up its water. Many a family kept the old hand pump standing in the yard long after the modern plumbing came in, not out of sentiment, but out of sense, because they knew the day might come when the power failed and the modern well went silent. That stubborn iron pump, scorned as a relic, was the one water source on the property that a storm could not switch off. The people who tore theirs out for a tidy lawn learned in the next long outage exactly what they had thrown away. Number 5, catching the dew. When the wells ran dry and the rain would not come, the desperate and the clever turned to the water that the night left behind. Every clear, still night, the cool air pulls moisture out of the sky and lays it down as dew on every cold surface, and a person who knew this could gather it. A clean cloth or a fleece dragged across the morning grass came back heavy with water that could be wrung into a pail. Sheets of metal or stone, set out cold overnight, wept dew at dawn that ran down into a trough below. It was never much, a cup here, a quart there, but in the driest hours, it was something where there had been nothing, and something is what keeps a person alive. In a long, dry blackout with no other source, the dew on the dawn grass is a reminder that water is almost always there if you know how to ask the morning for it. Number 4, the solar still. This is the trick that pulls drinking water out of mud, salt, and even poison, using nothing but a hole, a sheet, and the sun. A pit was dug in the ground. A cup or pot was set in the center, and the dirty water, brackish, muddy, foul, anything wet, was poured into the pit around the cup. A clear sheet of plastic or oiled cloth was stretched across the top of the hole, sealed at the edges with dirt, and a small stone set in the middle, so it sagged down to a point right over the cup. The sun heated the pit. The water rose as pure vapor, condensed clean on the underside of the cover, and ran down the sag to drip into the cup, drop by patient drop, leaving every bit of salt and filth and bad chemistry behind in the pit. It was distillation, the purest process known, done with a shovel and a sheet. Slow, yes, but it turned undrinkable into drinkable, which in a 30-day crisis is no small thing. Number 3, silver in the crock. Here is the metal your grandmother dropped in without ever knowing why. Long before refrigeration, before chlorine, families would slip a silver coin or a silver spoon into the bottom of the milk pail or the water crock, and the water and milk would stay sweet and unspoiled far longer than they had any right to. It was treated as an old wives' tale, a bit of country superstition. It was nothing of the kind. Silver, like copper, slowly releases a trace of itself into water, and that trace is lethal to the bacteria that spoil and sour and sicken. The very same effect that scientists have now measured in the laboratory and put to use in everything from hospital surfaces to space station water systems. The pioneers crossing the plains were said to drop silver dollars into their water barrels for exactly this reason, to keep the barrel water drinkable through months on the trail. They had no theory, they had results. A single silver coin in the bottom of your stored water barrel is a purifier that never runs out, never needs power, and lasts forever. Number 2, the settling barrel and a pinch of clearing. Muddy water cannot be stored and should not be drunk, and the old hands had a quiet way of turning a barrel of churned up brown water clear without a single filter. They let it stand. Time and stillness alone will drop most of the silt and grit to the bottom of a barrel over a day or two, leaving the clear water above to be gently dipped or siphoned off the top, careful never to stir up the sediment below. And when they wanted it faster and cleaner, a small pinch of alum, the same powder used in pickling, was stirred in. The alum made the fine, cloudy particles clump together into heavy flakes that sank fast, dragging the murk to the bottom and leaving the water above startlingly clear in an hour instead of a day. It was the very first step that every great water plant still uses, the clarifying that comes before all the rest. With nothing but patience and a pinch of pickling powder, a family could take the worst-looking water and make it clear enough to filter, boil, and store. Number 1, water put by. At the top of this list is the plainest idea of all, so plain it sounds like nothing, and it is the whole secret. Not a clever gadget, not a rare skill, just the simple, steady habit of always keeping water stored ahead of need. A barrel in the cellar, a shelf of sealed jars, a cistern under the porch, a rain barrel at the gutter, a few drops of bleach to keep it sweet, a date on every container. The families who came through every flood and drought and blackout in American history were not the ones with the most money or the best equipment. They were the ones who never let the store run empty, who treated water the way they treated firewood and canned beans, as something you laid in during the good times, so it was waiting in the bad. 1 gallon per person per day, 2 weeks at the very least, a month if you could manage it. That was the rule. It cost almost nothing. It took only the discipline to do it before you needed it. And it is the single most forgotten piece of survival wisdom we ever had, because the day the tap runs dry, the only water that matters is the water you already stored. Here is the challenge. Do one of these this week. Fill a few clean jars and date them. Set a barrel under the downspout. Find the drain valve on your water heater so you know where it is before you ever need it. Then come back and tell me which one you did. Tell me if your grandparents kept a cistern or a spring house, if anyone in your family dropped a silver coin in the water barrel, if there is an old hand pump still standing in a yard somewhere in your family's past. Drop it in the comments, because this was never just about water. It was about the quiet confidence of a family that knew it could take care of itself when the lights went out. Your grandmother knew. Now you know too.